the leaders of Europe reaffirm their support for Ukraine. The peace formula of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky support the idea of holding a peace summit and are ready to help to organize it. The conclusions were adopted in Brussels at the European Union leaders' meeting. They condemned the deliberate destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, which led to an environmental disaster and now threatens the safety of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and are concerned about the slowdown in the implementation of the grain deal. The main discussion on the topic of Ukraine were long because the conclusions on them were published at almost 2 a.m. I note Ukraine is not yet a member of the European Union, but almost all countries at the summit represented its interests. So I want to start with the quote of Mr. Borrell, Joseph Borrell. So he said afterwards, the military support to Ukraine has to be for the long haul. Borrell told reporters, suggesting the European Union could establish Ukrainian defense fund models on the peace facilities. So my question is, many options for security guarantees for Ukraine already we have, but there were few specifics or details during this time. So do you see these specifics and details in the statements or maybe in concrete actions that we will see in the near future?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think there is no question anymore as such among the European leaders, probably except one or two, I mean, I would not mention by names, who probably would abstain repeating it in public. But for the rest of the European leadership, it's really clear that we have to stand with Ukraine and assist Ukraine as long as it takes. And this is a very important, by the way, statement. It means that the West, the European Union, is ready, I mean, for a long-term support of Ukraine. Of course, I mean, it means money. We have to think where the money will come from. I mean, which parts of our budget. But this long-term commitment for victory of Ukraine, because I mean, the second part is about victory. There is no question, I mean, that we support Ukraine not just to continue a war. I mean, we support Ukraine for Ukraine to achieve a victory, to liberate its own territory, I mean, up to the internationally recognized borders. And I mean, the third element is that we're not going, I mean, to push Ukraine for any political deal or peace talks, settlements, as long as Ukraine didn't agree. I mean, it must come under the Ukrainian terms. So we are not masters in this regard. And I believe those elements I mentioned, and probably there are some more, but nevertheless, it's a strong, kind of common understanding among the European leadership as well as politicians in order to support Ukraine as much as it takes.
In terms of actual defense of Ukrainian cities, especially when we see each night the missile attacks on the civilians' infrastructure, again and again, our president and our government repeat that we need help with the F-16s. Ukraine will be able, with these flight jets, to defend Ukrainian cities from Russian missile terror in more effective way and advance on the battlefields more rapidly, as well with other military help. So what may speed up this process? And initiative is still from Ukrainian side. What stops or galvanize the decisions from our partners at the lie?
I have a hope, and my assessment is it's not because the West or the Western leaders still believe in any, kind of change in Russian behavior. I mean, it was such a sentiment probably in the beginning of this war of aggression against Ukraine. Some still believed that having one more phone conversation with Putin, you can change the course of the war. It's gone. I don't see it anymore. I mean, a repetition of those kind of even political mistakes, I would call it. But maybe there are some technicalities, important technicalities, which are not broadly reported to the wide public. Why it is so? Why F-16 is not yet in the skies above Ukraine? Why the Ukrainian pilots? Why it takes so long? To start training of the Ukrainian pilots as soon as possible, and not just in one country, but maybe in more than one country, in order to prepare as many as it needed. Once the F-16 will be supplied, I see certain delay, as well as with the training of the Ukrainian forces. I think the European Union could start it even in 22, in the second part of 22. It was clear that, once you give weapons and Ukrainian army uses different tactics, new approach, you need to train people. To act in a kind of interconnected with the modern sets or modern weaponry. So that's why I regret this delay. I really believe that will be no major time gap between talks about F-16 and delivery. This is important. I see a sign of agreement that the West needs to provide F-16 and more. F-16 is not the final, and Ukraine needs a lot of new modern ammunition and weaponry. So that's why let's be open-minded, and Ukraine must be supplied as with many new weapons as it needs to win against the much bigger army. So that's why only by modern weapons and on timely supplied modern weapons, Ukraine might achieve a victory we're speaking about.